So, Ofcom, for those who don't know us, is the UK's communications regulator. We're responsible to Parliament and independent of the government. Our principal duty is to further the citizen and consumer interest in relation to communications matters, and we do this across our remit. So this includes the licensing and regulation of TV and broadcast radio services, regulating video on demand and video sharing platforms, implementing the online safety regime, as well as, of course, our work on spectrum licensing and the regulation of telecoms and postal networks. So it's really great to be here in Madrid today to talk about radio in the automotive context, and a space which I think touches on several areas of our work. So, although people in the UK have a wider choice than ever of audio content, radio reach and consumption continues to be resilient, with 87% of adults listening to live radio at least weekly, and with over 1 billion minutes of weekly listening in Q1 2025. So, the UK's radio sector is made up of the BBC's local, nations, and UK-wide services, a commercial sector, which comprises a range of major groups, including Global, Bauer, and News Broadcasting, and a range of independent commercial stations and the community radio sector. And so what we can see here is overall, I think, in recent years, the BBC share of overall listening has declined. It's from around a half to now 43%, while the commercial sector now accounts for 55% of total radio listening minutes, with the largest two groups, Bauer and Global, accounting for 44%, so about now the same as the BBC. And certainly, DAB has been a factor in the growth of the commercial sector, allowing for both the launch of new independent broadcasters, as well as the launch of digital-only extensions or brands which simulcast on analog and digital platforms. For example, stations which focus on music from a particular decade or subgenre. So, the UK was an early adopter of DAB, and DAB accounts for over 40% of total UK radio listening, making it the largest platform by share. So, in addition to 3 UK-wide DAB multiplexes, one of which is the BBC's and the 2 commercial, which carry 67 services in total as of last year, there are 58 local multiplexes, and we are currently in the process of licensing some small-scale multiplexes, offering the potential for even more targeted local DAB services. So we're now onto our 7th round of licensing of these small-scale multiplexes, and earlier this year we reached the milestone of over 70 small-scale multiplexes broadcasting around the UK. Another trend we see here is the growth in listening via the internet, and in particular smart speakers, with these devices accounting for 18% of total listening in Q1 2025, while at the same time we've seen the share of AM and FM minutes decrease. The car is a key environment for radio, and it accounts for just over a quarter of total listening at the current time. So as we see here, that total listening in cars has recovered from the pandemic. In fact, is now above the reported pre-pandemic levels. And at the same time, DAB's share of listening has grown at the expense of AM listening, and so AM/FM listening. And so it now accounts for 56% of total in-car minutes. Radio listening via the internet remains only a small proportion of total in-car listening, only 7% versus 29% of listening overall. And for many people, the only place they listen to the radio is in the car. So the latest figures show that as of Q1 this year, 11.5 million people in the UK only listened to the radio each week in the car and nowhere else. So listening to live radio on DAB or DAB Plus radio in the car continues to be the most common in-car audio activity. And our recently published data shows that 53% of those people who use a car as a sort of driver or passenger say that they listen to a DAB radio in the car, and that's an increase of 4 percentage points since 2024. Around 3 in 10 car users listen to music via a streaming service, via a mobile phone, while 14% of people listen to a music streaming service via an in-car infotainment system, and that's up from 11% in 2024. Our analysis of touchpoints data covering media behaviours in Great Britain shows that 74% of audio listening in cars is to live radio, with music streaming services accounting for 16%, with the remainder being podcasts, personal music, audiobooks, and on-demand radio. And of this live radio listening, 99% of it is via the car radio set. So the car radio continues to account for the significant majority of audio consumption in the car. So last year, we asked regular car, van, or lorry drivers and passengers, i.e. those who travel in those vehicles at least once a week, how they control the radio when they're in the vehicle. And so use of physical buttons or dials on the vehicle's dashboard or control panel is the most common way to control functions of the radio, though over half use a steering wheel controls to change the radio's volume, compared to only 17% who use a built-in touchscreen to do this. However, for more complex operations, touchscreens are more likely to be used. 35% saying that they use one to select or change a radio station, compared to 44% using physical buttons, and 27% using it to switch to other types of audio. So while voice controls are well established with some early voice control systems such as the Honda Acura voice control, Fiat's Blue and Me, and Ford Sync being available around 20 years ago, and more recently the rise of internet-enabled voice assistants, actually the use of voice in the car to control the radio is relatively low, with only 10% of people using it to select radio stations. And that's sort of in line with the use to change volume and switch to other types of audio. So almost 7 in 10 people who use cars, who have a car in their household, have a DAB or DAB Plus radio in their car, and 6 in 10 actually use DAB radio in their car. So of all these kind of chemical connected car features here, DAB or DAB Plus radio is the most common. I'd also note here that we have a third of people saying that at least one of their cars in their household has Apple CarPlay and or Android Automotive, and a quarter of people, so 25% of people with a car, saying that they actually use it. And then around 3 in 10 people have a car in their household with some form of built-in infotainment system which can connect to the internet without needing a mobile phone. And again, 25% of drivers and passengers say that they use this feature. I think it's worth pointing out here that newer, more advanced connected car features sometimes take time to filter through, given that they tend to first appear on selected high-end models or marques before being rolled out across a wider range of models. And of course, the replacement cycle will also affect the diffusion of these features. So the average age of a licensed car in the UK stood at 10 years at the end of last year versus 9 years from the year before. And although new car registrations increased by around 3% last year to reach 2 million, we're still below the pre-pandemic levels of new car purchases. So what are other media activities in the car? We've seen obviously the launch of increasingly sophisticated infotainment systems and updates to Android Auto and Apple's CarPlay. Well, actually, at the present time, it seems that only a small proportion of people actually use a vehicle regularly, actually use these AV services, with only 7% streaming video content and 6% of people playing games on an onboard infotainment system. And we compare that to overall use of 63% of a FM or DAB radio in the car, and 1 in 5 saying that they use a music streaming service there. Though I'd also note there are some sort of differences in behaviour, particularly among the younger demographic that is more likely to be using these AV services. And so around 3/4 of people value being able to listen to radio in a vehicle. And And it's interesting again here to see actually there isn't so much difference in demographics here between ages. People often talk about younger demographics, maybe moving away from radio, or actually in the car, it's still something that they expect and value. However, I'd also note that having streaming services in the car does seem to be more important for these younger demographics than for the population as a whole. So I think that's something, obviously, we need to sort of think about in the future. So then, sort of in conclusion, radio in the UK continues to be resilient. As I say, as we've seen, around 9 in 10 adults listen to the radio each week. In-car listening is growing. And the BBC, commercial and community broadcasters are continuing to invest in new DAB services. Research also finds that despite the plethora of options people now have to listen to audio services, people, young and both old, continue to value in-car radio and expect it to be there. And then finally, I think it's just worth thinking about the future and the fact that although we see limited use of streaming in the car and even more limited use of AV media in the car, that's something we might sort of need to sort of think about and consider for the future, given demographic trends and the rollout of newer advanced features. So finally, just to say that I'd encourage you to download our audio listening in the UK report. We published a report last month, and that focuses on audio behaviours in the UK. You can download that from our website. And also, later in the summer, we'll be publishing our Media Nations 2025 report. That's our flagship cross-sector report, which looks at audience and industry trends across the AV and audio sectors. And again, it will be completely free to download from our website, and we'll also be publishing data alongside that. So thank you very much.